I'm Daphne Terrace. I'm proud to be Dean of the Edwards School of Business. For all of you who asked me, yes, going into my 3rd year here. And I'd like to welcome everybody to the Edwards School of Business and to the 6th annual presentation in the Gord and Maureen Haddock Entrepreneurial Speaker Series. And it's my task this morning to, first of all, encourage everybody to please have a seat. Please have a cookie when you get a chance. We've got some refreshments here. But it's my task this morning, or sorry, this afternoon, to tell you a little bit about Gord and Maureen, who are very good friends of the Edwards School of Business. Both are graduates from the University of Saskatchewan. Our actual alumnus is Gord Haddock from the old College of Commerce, where he has a million stories you probably don't want to know. And Maureen for sure doesn't want to know. And Maureen is a graduate of the College of Education here at the University of Saskatchewan. They are true entrepreneurs. They have, if they stretch their arms all the way across both of them and they link hands in the middle, that's how much experience they have had opening businesses, weathering the storms of being entrepreneurs, making difficult strategic decisions. And basically what I really want to say is what they have done that has touched us the most is they have inspired, through their mentorship, other generations of entrepreneurs. And that's what this whole series is about. It's them digging deep in themselves to very generously give back to the school that produced to them some inspiration so that they can plant some seeds of entrepreneurial curiosity, interest, desire in others. I've had I wasn't here when they began the speaker series in 2007, but when you first walk into the Edwards School of Business, right on the right-hand side are plaques of each time there's been a speaker, and there have been some sensational talks in the past. Each year we've had very good fortune to hear from a variety of entrepreneurs as they share their personal experiences with us. What I want to also do is welcome all the students. I know there's staff and faculty here, but it's really quite wonderful seeing so many students here at an event like this because we're planting the seeds very early. We're not necessarily telling you you're going to graduate as entrepreneurs. Even the legendary Brett Wilson didn't graduate as an entrepreneur. He built his networks. He was thoughtful. Hey, Brian McCrae. He was thoughtful. He took a while learning. And then when he was ready, he just went for it. So I want you all to listen carefully to the story of an entrepreneur, to meet our entrepreneurs, and to think about when you might be ready to just go for it. And we would wish you all the success, all the luck, and all the support that we can give you as a School of Business to help you out when that time comes. So it's my pleasure now to turn the microphone over to Gordon Haddock. And beside him.
Are you going to turn? Here we are. I'll turn this one off. Seeing how we have. How do you turn that one off? I don't have my glasses on yet. There we go. This is my wife at the front. The white hair, I did that. I started dating her when I was 12. And by the time she was 17, she was going gray. So she's easy to pick out in the crowd. Everybody remembers her and never remembers me. And just give me a second here while we get organized. And while I'm doing this, the first thing I want to do is say a special thank you to Jan. Where are you, Jan? She's always hiding somewhere. There she is, hiding. Jan takes all the time and effort to put the speaker series together. And that's sometimes very hard to get people coordinated in the same room at the same time with people and their busy schedules. And to keep students out of the bag parking for our guests when they arrive. They seem to always fill up when there's a space that says no parking, everybody parks there. And Jan even looks after those details. So thank you, Jan. I'm just going to throw my glasses on. I know Vaughn has glasses, so I decided I should have glasses too. But before I introduce Vaughn, what I wanted to do is just quickly summarize what the goal is, and Daphne actually did it a lot better than I'm going to, but it's very simple. We want to expose students to entrepreneurs and their entrepreneurial journeys, and we want the students to hear about all the obstacles they overcame and even the failures that they had to eventually achieve success. And we hopefully, if we inspire just one student, to start something, then we've succeeded. And there can be not a better place in this whole world than Saskatchewan at this time. I used to tell all my buddies when we went, I graduated in '71, 90% of the students went to Calgary to get a job. And some of them started very successful oil companies and other businesses. And I used to say, it's easy to go to Alberta and be successful. A real entrepreneur is the guy that stays here. And I won't get into the politics of that, but anyways. So when I was trying to figure out how should I introduce Vaughn, because there's a lot of different angles you can come at him from, and I was fiddling at my desk one day and I suddenly remembered a story that a friend of his told me many, many years ago. So I have all the basic details. They're facts. I maybe just filled in a few of the gaps because time has done that to my memory of the event. But I had to go back to 1971. And in 1971, I was just finishing my 4th year upstairs, and I was probably in the 2nd floor lounge playing bridge and making important decisions like what time we'd meet at the Cavalier for a beer, unlike today where kids are studying in the lounge, which I still can't figure out. But at that same moment that I was up there, Vaughn was in London, England, and he was applying for a job as a salesperson at a car dealership. And you gotta love the car dealership's name. It's Perry's of Finchley, and it was a Ford dealer. I don't know how you market Perry's of Finchley, have it sound really exciting, but anyways. And Vaughn presented an amazing resume about all the things he'd done and the things he'd sold and the car industry connections. And of course that resume combined with Vaughn's outgoing personality, well, immediately he got the job. Now in 1971, communication wasn't like it is today, and we were past carrier pigeons. You remember those. But there was fax machines had been invented, but they didn't come into real use till the end of the 80s or 90s. So there was really only 2 ways to communicate, and one was telephone, and the other was mail. And of course, telephone was, believe it or not, $5 to $8 a minute for an overseas call. And that's a lot of money even today, but when you considered in 1971, a commerce grad starting out made $600 a month, that's the equivalent like of an hour and 10-minute call or whatever, and you're done with your salary. So Perry's of Finchley's, of course, having a good HR department, wrote a letter back to Canada, check on Vaughn's resume and all this, and 6 to 8 weeks later, they got a reply back. And there was a problem with the resume in that perhaps Vaughn had kind of embellished his things he had done. And then the second problem they had was that he was their #1 salesman. So being a very astute group of people, they just, no doubt, just filed that in the garbage and let him alone. So that told me 2 things about Vaughn. One, that was his love of the car dealership and the car business. And 2, that he is a guy that set his goals, and he really went for it and always achieved it. And as a result is, of course, very successful. So that's the tact I'm taking at success. How do you define it? And some people would say, well, it's the number of awards that you get. And Vaughn literally, if you take an 8.5 by 11, 10-point print, it fills from the top to the bottom. So he's got that covered. The next thing is the number of community organizations that he belongs to or had belonged to. And again, same 8.5, 10-point, full page. Chairman of this, chairman of that. So that he's done. The third thing is, say, financial commitments to community organizations. Well, I don't know if you go to any event around town, you'll always see Jubilee Ford, this sponsored that, vans for this or whatever. So over the decades, he's literally given millions of dollars and or services to community organizations. So that's sort of the HR side, the soft side, and there's lots of people who would want the hard facts, numbers, right? And they want to know, okay, success is defined by the number of businesses that you have. So let's just check that out. And let me tell you, by that standard, Vaughn is extremely successful. Now, this is at last count. He had 14 car dealerships, everything from Hyundai to Volvo to Ford to Mercedes to Porsche of Saskatchewan. So I guess that covers that part. He is majority stakeholder in an award-winning brewery. You might have heard of it, Great Western. He has 2 real estate companies. He was chairman and he still is very active and a shareholder in a large North American company that supplies insurance and warranties and all sorts of other things for car dealerships across North America. And it goes on and on, Spiffy Car Wash or detail shops and so on. So let's check that box off. He's got that covered. Another hard number that some of the business class would like is, well, what are his sales? And Vaughn is very humble about that, and you often don't see numbers with Vaughn. And but I'll tell you right now, he does $300 million in sales, his group of companies, which if you look at any of the charts and business magazines, you see it's a pretty impressive number. The next thing is, some would say, well, how many employees? That's how we're going to judge success. How many employees does he have? Well, he has 400 employees. And that's a huge, huge amount. You can't imagine that unless you've had 4 or 40. To get another 0 on there is amazing, and the amount of work it would take. So Maureen and I agree with all those points, that that's a measure of success. But we have a few other things that we add that we think are important. And number one is taking and giving time. And despite the fact that Vaughn is extremely busy, he's made the time to come here and talk to us tonight. And he has always taken time and given it. And you know, we became customers of Vaughn's in May of 1987. And there wasn't once in the last 25 years, if we ran into him in the bank or at the dealership or an airport in Minneapolis, that he didn't have the time to talk to you. And that's amazing, because he's a busy guy, as you can see by the number of companies that he has. Another measure that Maureen and I think is important is the people that he surrounds him with. And because Vaughn loves what he does, and he's enthusiastic, and he always has a desire to be the best, that sort of feeling is picked up by the people around him, and his values are shared by them. And this shows up in his team. We are still dealing 25 years later with the same group of guys almost that we started with. Whether it's Pat or Liam or Bob or Bull, they're still there. And that's amazing when you can take somebody and have them stay with you 1 decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. That's a direct reflection of the kind of leader you are and the kind of person you are. And that, to Maureen and I, is success. So, ladies and gentlemen, Vaughn Wyant.
Am I on? Well, first of all, Gord, the only reason I said hello to you in Minneapolis was because I was trying to sell you another car. I was probably successful at that. I used to get nervous coming to university, so I didn't. You know, Gord, by the way, don't you guys all have something better to do? I mean, really, when you think about it, you're coming to a classroom to listen to a car salesman tell you how to become better. And I'm pretty sure you could all do a little bit better than that. You know, I do a lot of speaking, and Gord, you know, I was almost going to say, Gord, you gave away my whole speech, and we can all go home now. But a lot of people find it interesting about how you get into business and what that process looks like. And I'll start by telling you that it's not premeditated, it's not predetermined. You're not able to actually figure out how your business life is going to progress. If you're lucky enough to find something that you do that you're truly passionate about, it's really the start of the whole thing. I know so many people that work for so many different companies, and some of them even own their own business, that they really just don't even like what they do because they do it for the wrong reason. They actually do it to make money. You know, actually get into business to make money. You know, and I've always told people that, I'm the last person that gets paid in my organization, and everybody else has to get paid first, so it's a huge responsibility. But I got into this business on day one because I just love selling things. And it wasn't even so much cars. I was a young kid, and I'm going to tell the story better than you did, okay? That was really bad, okay? No, it was good. But I got to tell you the story about how I got into business because, you know, you stumble into these things. You fall upon them, and you don't understand why until later. So I'm going to start with giving you a little bit of a thought starter. And I subscribe to this theory that present thoughts determine your future, and you don't get what you want, you get what you think about. So remember, present thoughts determine your future, and you don't get what you want, you get what you think about. And so a really good example of that, which I'm really bad at, is golf, right? And my son Philip is here, and he'll tell you that I'm not good at this. I'm pretty good at this at business, but I'm not so good at golf. You know, and they talk about when you play golf how you visualize the shot, you see the shot, then you step up and you make the shot. So I'm not so good at visualizing my golf game because what I'm visualizing when I'm playing golf is where the ball is not going to go, where it's not supposed to go. You know, that's just the way I play the game. But in business, it's exactly the opposite of that. So when I was in high school in Saskatoon, and you know, I was fortunate enough to be raised in just a great family, a very loving family, and a family that, you know, had a patriarch that, you know, was a medical pioneer in Saskatoon. Pretty big shoes to follow. And I have 4 brothers, and not one of us became doctors. And he was one of the founding doctors of the anesthesia department at the University Hospital here in Saskatoon. So, and he was smart. He was book smart, and I was street smart. My 2 older brothers were book smart. The problem is that they did the same things I did, but I got caught, right? So that was part of my training. When I left high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. My dad was a doctor. My brother was super smart. My next brother was super smart. And I just didn't see myself fitting into that academia that they had followed. And so I went to London, England. I worked as a laborer. I learned to become a welder. I came back to Saskatoon. I took 1 year of university. I failed miserably. And I went back to England, and I got an interview to a Ford dealership in London, as Gord mentioned. And the interview, back then selling automobiles was a pretty prestigious occupation. And so I got the interview. I walked in. The guy's name and it was Tony Milner. He's about 6'3", and I remember it to the day. And you know, he asked me whether I had sold cars before, and I said yes, which was not true. So I'm not suggesting that you have to lie to get your first job, but it really helped for me, and it probably, and it probably, well, I always tell people that selling is nothing more than just telling good stories, right? So let's just call it a good story. So I said yes, and he said where? Now remember, I said present thoughts determine your future, right? And I said I sold cars part-time in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, at a place called Jubilee Ford. Now, the reason I said that was because that's where my dad used to lease his cars from. So I didn't know at the time that there was no such thing as a part-time automobile salesperson, because there isn't. But I figured I was in a foreign country and it really didn't matter, and I was a long way away. And you know what, I got to tell you, they had telegrams back then too. Just so you know, you made it sound like it was in the dark ages, like, you know, with a can and a string. Yeah, you there? And anyway, he hired me, and for me, it was the easiest thing I'd ever done in my life. Now, when I was a kid, I was in the Saskatoon Boys Choir, and we used to have to sell tickets. And the way you sold tickets was you sold tickets door to door. You knocked on doors, and you sold tickets to your concerts. That's how you got people to listen to the thing. And there was always a little prize for whoever sold the most tickets. And I remember going down Saskatchewan Crescent, down by the brewery, knocking on every single door. And I don't know if they felt sorry for me, but I always sold more tickets than anybody else. I just didn't find any difficulty meeting people. Not so good in the bars with women later, but really good selling tickets to the Saskatoon Boys Choir. So he hired me, and I started selling cars, and I was making 8 to 10 pounds per car, and I used to have to clean my own cars, run around England doing dealer transfers to find cars we didn't have in stock, and I even installed the own. We worked real hard. And what happened exactly was about 6 weeks later, I got a call, and Tony called me into his office, and he said, "Hey, listen," he said, "I wrote a letter, and I got a letter back, and they say they've never heard of you before." So this is when I knew I was going to be good at this business, because without batting an eyelid, I said, "Let me see who signed that letter." I got nothing here. I got nothing. And so he showed it to me, and I said, "That's not the guy I used to work for." Another story. But what I always find, by then I was their best salesperson, and I was always an energetic, kind of happy guy, you know, so I wasn't a bad guy to have around the showroom for all the miserable old Englishmen that had been selling cars there for years. So I was pretty good, and it was cool. We used to go next door to the pub every day and drink 2 or 3 pints of beer at lunchtime. So it was a cool job at the same time. So he couldn't really fire me. He just accepted that as being the truth. But what I always found interesting, and my dad used to laugh. He used to tell this story to everybody. What he used to find so interesting was that years later, you know, I came back to Saskatoon and bought the company that I said I worked for when I first got into the business. Present thoughts determine your future. And, you know, I took a long course with the Pacific Institute in Seattle, Washington, which I ended up being a facilitator for, and it was all about this kind of thing, you know. So first of all, being passionate about what you want to do is one thing, but being highly focused on what your objective is. And goal setting, which people talk about a lot, is people say you got to set a goal, but you know, there's a big goal, and you can look out as far as you're able to look at. In life, it's the horizon, but then there's all these intermediate goals you have to set. And when I came back to Canada and I got a job selling cars in Vancouver, it was still just as easy as it was when I was in England. And I set a goal at the time that, because I saw the sales managers that I worked for, and I thought at the time that I could do their job a lot better than they did. So my goal at that point in time was never to go to another company, was never to leave that company. My goal was to get that job. And when I got that job, my goal was to be the general sales manager, and then I got a goal that I wanted to own my own car dealership. And I did that. I bought a small dealership in Carstairs, Alberta. I used to say you could throw a cat through the wall. It was a gas station. And since Gord wanted me to talk to you about how you develop from, you know, high school and not knowing what you do to being successful at what you do, that car dealership was pretty much a one-man operation. I had one technician. We had a dirt floor in the garage. We had no showroom, but you know, we pumped gas. You know, so I pumped gas. I sold parts. I wrote service orders. I did half of the accounting. My son Philip's here. He probably wouldn't like the accounting I used to do back then, but they seemed to add up pretty good. And I took the trades. I pretty much did everything. So I had a great opportunity to learn every single facet of the business that I'm in before I took the next step. So remember, present thoughts determine your future. You don't get what you want, you get what you think about. And so when I'm talking to people and they're talking to me about, the month they're having or their business career or whatever, I always ask them, well, what are you thinking about right now? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about being successful? Are you thinking about accomplishing what you want to accomplish? Or are you thinking about not doing that? What is going through your head? So I've trained myself for years and years to try to abandon all negative self-talk that enters my head, because I think it has no value. It has no value for me anyway, and I don't think it has any value for anybody else in this room. So those are sort of some of the, that's how I got into business, and the rest is kind of a bit of a blur because, I didn't have any money. I actually don't have any money now. I owe the bank just a ton of money. I mean, it's just crazy how much money I owe to them, and I think that they really think that I'm going to be able to pay them too. My kids told me the other day, he says, Dad, do you know how much property you own now? I go, I never thought about it. Like, it's a lot, right? And it just creeps on you, because as long as you're successful, as long as you're looking after your obligations, people will continue to lend money. And when I got into business early, a very good friend of mine said to me, the 3 people in business that you want to pay attention to are your lawyer, your accountant, and your banker, because those are the 3 people that put you into business and keep you in the business. So, you got to make them your best friend. And Trevor from MNPSC is not my best friend. He thinks I am, but honestly, he's not my best friend. But it's very, very, those contacts as you get into business are absolutely vital. And you need to establish great connections and great contacts with those 3 people, because they are really vital to you being able to grow your business. You could get into business, stay into business. To be able to grow your business, you have to establish those relationships. Talk quickly about some of my guiding principles, my fundamentals, things that I think that are important in running my business. And I would say to you that the overlay to that is trust and respect. I said to you I was fortunate enough to be raised in a great family. I'm going to give all the credit to my mother. She was English, but she taught us lots of fundamentals. And some of the stuff, I remember her saying to me, going, I'll never say that to anything. I say the same thing to my kids today. But honestly, it's about trust and respect in everything you do. And where it starts in a business, in a company, is with your employees, the people that you hire that carry the load for your company. And if you think about it, I mean, we hire people, we build this, expensive building on a very expensive piece of real estate. We load it with inventory, millions and millions and millions of dollars of inventory, and then we turn this thing over to a bunch of people. We turn it over to them. We say, here you go. Now think about the awesome responsibility that we've just laid in their hands. And so I learned a long time ago, and probably long before I was in business, that respect and trust and saying please and thank you, it's a life fundamental, but it's a business fundamental. And so we treat our employees the same way that we want to be treated back. And it sounds corny, but I think that in my companies, I think we are a group of equals. And there's always got to be a boss. There's always got to be somebody. But in my company, I'll put my own license plates on my car. I'll wash my own motorcycle. I actually like doing all that stuff. There's no prima donnas. There's nobody that is higher or better than anybody else. It's true. We all get paid different amounts because we take on different levels of responsibility and risk. But we are a group of equals. And I can walk you through my business, and I can introduce you to 50 of my employees, and if I ask the question, how long have you worked for me, you'd get anywhere from 5, 20, 30. We've got people that have started washing cars for us and are now master technicians. They worked for us for 30 years. It's our company. We're so fortunate because I don't come into work on Monday morning and have a whole bunch of employee issues like this guy quit or that guy quit or they're going to have a union set up. And nothing like that ever happens because we operate on this fundamental principle of mutual trust and respect. And the way we used to get there before we hired an HR person was we never used to have the same level of success in filling up our job ranks. You'd always have, there's always an analogy that I like to use, that if you throw a bad apple, a rotten apple in a basket of good apples, it's going to turn the whole basket rotten, right? So what do you do when you run a business? You do everything you can to avoid putting the rotten apple in the basket of good apples. So the way we did that finally when we were, because you learn this stuff through trial and error. You don't know it going in. You just try to think of better ways to get to where you want to go. So we, a number of years ago, before we hired a human resources manager, which told us that we were getting big, we actually formed a committee, and we called it the hiring committee. And because we decided that even though our managers were all competent at what they did, they were never trained. They were never trained on how to hire people. So they were pretty good at determining, specific skills. For example, our collision center manager would be pretty good at determining that Gord here was a pretty good body man. He could probably fix the cars, but he wasn't very good at determining whether this guy would fit into our culture, whether he had that warm smile, whether he would be part of what would eventually make up a pretty good core of employees. So we put a hiring committee together, and the hiring committee was made up of a whole bunch of people that were not managers. They're just volunteer employees that would get together. So our managers used to were able to interview on technical ability, but not on the real important stuff, which is, are they going to fit in with this family? Are they going to make the basket of apples rotten or not? And so they would present a couple of people to the hiring committee. The hiring committee would sit in the boardroom, and they would interview them for, the cultural side of the business. Will they fit with them? And the funny thing happened was, if the hiring committee decided that Gord was a good guy, that he'd fit in our committee, I'll tell you exactly what happened. Because the employees were engaged in being part of the process to hire the people that they were eventually going to work with, they made sure that Gord was successful, because it was their idea. So all of a sudden you'd see employees taking Gord and walking him through. By the way, I'd never hire you, but no, but he's better as a customer, right? But you'd see employees actually taking these new hires through the business and interviewing them, or having them meet the balance of the employees. It never happened when a manager hired them. The managers never had time to do that. But the employees now took ownership of how it worked. So that's how we build the culture in our business. We make sure that we have engagement in our organization. Now that we have a human resources manager, to be honest with you, he does that. Like, he actually walks new employees through and makes sure that they are engaged and they feel like they're part of the thing. The final thing I think I want to talk to you about today is everybody, usually in a Q&A, people want to know about selling, because my skill set is clearly selling stuff. Like, I like to sell stuff. That's how I spend, a very good part of my time even today is selling cars. The rest of it is like, I hired guys like Philip to pick up the pieces, right? He adds up the numbers, but really nothing happens until we sell something. Nothing happens until we actually put a car in the street. Someone said to me this morning, they said, God, it was slippery out there, wasn't it? I go, yeah. I said, there's going to be people crashing into each other everywhere, which for me is really good, right? Because we'll sell 50 or 60% of all the crash parts for Ford, 100% of the Mercedes, Porsche, Audi, Jag, Volvo, Land Rover parts. So when people kind of crash into each other, it's actually really quite good for business. So today was a good day for me. But selling is something that is, I think it's pretty innate. Like, you either can do this, or you're either kind of good at this or not. And certainly there's a lot of things I'm not very good at. But one thing I'm really good at is selling. And a lot of people ask me, like, how do you become a successful salesperson? Well, if you run a business, if you own a business eventually, I'm telling you, you're a salesperson. I'm sure, Gord, when you ran your store, You're selling all the time, right? All the time. And I tell people that selling is nothing more than building obligation with someone that you'd never met before. So I'll give you a quick example. You know, one of our principles in our business is that when we hire a new salesperson, we try to hire someone that's never been in the business before. We used to be like every other car dealer. And we'd actually look at a resume and see, well, they've worked here, 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 and here. Usually it's a year here, 2 years here, 2.5 years here. And so now we take a stab at them. What do we know that the other people didn't know? Well, I was walking past our sales office one morning a number of years ago, and I said to my sales manager, I said, you know, Scotty, we need to hire a couple salespeople, don't we? And he said, and this is where the light really turned on for me, how you hire people and what it's all about. And he said, you know what, boss? He said, I just can't find anybody with enough experience. And I started to walk away, and I stopped, and I went back, and I said, you know why you want to hire people with experience? I said, because you're too damn lazy to train them, right? And from that moment on, for the most part, we only hire people that have never sold cars before in their life, that have no bad habits, that don't have a resume that showed they worked at 10 car dealerships, because that's what people think about the car business. And we train them from the ground up. And how we train them and what we try to get them to focus on is the relationships in their life that have been the most important. And so, you know, I'm going to pick on you, Gord. Again, I wouldn't hire you, but if I did, the first thing I would say to you is I'd train you a little bit if you're trainable, and then I'd send you out. Then I'd send you out to mystery shop some other car dealerships in town. So pretend you're a customer. You know, I'd say go try to trade your car and make some notes. See how you're treated. How quickly do they greet you? Do they send you out on a test drive? Do they accompany you? Do they phone you back? Do they get your email addresses? A litany of things that you need to do if you're in the business of selling something. And so then I'll say, well, now, Gord, if you were in the car business here for 2 or 3 weeks and you went home and your mom and dad had just gone out and bought a new car from somebody else, how'd that make you feel? You know, they all go, I'd feel awful. They would never do that. No, I understand that, but how would it make you feel if your mom and dad bought a car from someone else knowing you're in the car business? You'd feel awful. I said, so the real thing is that you expect them to do business with you. You know, this relationship, mother and father and son or daughter, that relationship is all built on your belief that they're obligated to do business with you, correct? Yeah. They'd never buy a car from anyone else, which is why in our business, by the way, when we hire new salespeople, the first 6 cars they sell are to friends and relatives. They don't even know why. First of all, they're comfortable talking to them. Second of all, parents usually want to support their kids and buy a car for them. But you can't keep cycling through new salespeople just to sell all the mums and dads in town because it'd never end, right? We'd be training forever. I said, so here's what you need to do. You know, and this is a good business lesson for everybody here that either gets in business or it doesn't work in the nightclub too, by the way, is you need, when someone walks in the door or they go online and they search out an automobile on the internet or they call you, your job is to create a relationship as soon as possible with that individual that is as close to the relationship you have with your mom and dad. Because people, you need to build an obligation with people. So go out and call everybody you played hockey with or volleyball with. Phone everybody you went to scouts with. All your school pals. There's an obligation that they will help you, assist you in being successful. So now the only thing you have to think about beyond that is how do you take a complete stranger and build an obligation with that stranger to make them want to buy a car from you or to do business with you, regardless of what your business is. And you do that through trust and respect. You do that by making sure that they will feel bad if you see them driving someone else's car in town. You want to build that relationship to the point where really kind of want to make them feel kind of bad. Gee, I really like that Vaughn. You know, Now, you always have to have great products that you're passionate about. All that stuff has to fit, but you're assuming that when they come into your business, you've got something that they're interested in buying or they wouldn't have come there to begin with. So selling is all about building obligation, about creating a relationship based on trust and respect that people just are going to feel really bad if they don't do business with you. That's a fundamental principle of what we do. And I brought a little thing about, we were talking about my employees. I should have read this at the time when we were talking about our employees, but this is the kind of thing that we like to get in our company. And this actually happened on October the 2nd. And I got an email from one of our employees, and it said, it's my 1-year anniversary today at Jubilee. And this employee, by the way, works in our service department. He's not a top-tier manager or anything like that. And he says, it's my 1-year anniversary at Jubilee. I just want to say I'm very grateful to be here. It's a great work environment here at VWAG. Congratulations to all my coworkers. You make my day. Every day I'm happy, 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 and happy face. Thank you. So that's pretty cool. That's the kind of feedback that we want to get, and that's what tells us that we're doing a good job. And I can tell you that all of that stuff combined makes business super easy to conduct. And if you get up out of bed in the morning and you drag yourself to work because you really don't like your job, or you don't like the people you work with, or you don't like the people you work for, you will not find any measure of success. And I'd say to you, if you feel that way, honestly, you need to go find something else to do. For my part, I want my people to get out of bed in the morning going, I cannot wait to get to work. They're working with their best friends. They're all supporting each other through good times and bad, because if you have this many employees, people get sick, things happen that you never expected when you first get into business. You go to funerals, things like that happen in business. And I see my employees rallying together as not just a bunch of people that go to work to make a living, people that go to work to raise a family, stay in Saskatchewan, cheer for the Riders regardless of how they play, and actually make it a career choice for their life. Not for, I'll try this for you. I had a lot of people say, I always wanted to try selling cars. And I go, you know what, it's not about trying it. This is about being successful, and it's about doing it. And it's my responsibility as an employer to give them an environment, a great work environment, a good building to work out of, lots of product to sell, proper marketing and advertising, but most importantly, a culture and environment that they can be proud of, that they can have their kids work for later. And by the way, we get lots of that too. We got lots of kids, employees that are working in our organization. So that's sort of my fundamental guiding principles about what I do every day and how I run my business. And I just want to point out, I'm not the majority shareholder of Great Western Brewing Company, but I'm a major shareholder. My partners might be upset if I start putting that in my CV. So that's generally what I wanted to talk to you about. Just more than anything today, a few thought starters about business, what I think it takes, psychologically to get into business, the passion that you need for what you decide to do. So if for the people in this room that are considering a career or have considered a career, I used to, when I was in high school, about grade 10, they started to do some career assessments, trying to figure out what all these kids at Evan Hardy would want to do when they got out of Evan Hardy. And so they did some, they were called predictive indexes, where you answer a bunch of questions, it comes out in a graph, and the graph is matched against people in like industries, and then they say, hey, you're going to be really good at this, right? I mean, if you can imagine. And they put the whole grade 10 class through. Now, my friends had already decided what they were going to do. Now, I can tell you in grade 10 you're not passionate about anything except girls and cars, right? But, oh yeah, and drinking beer. Forgot about that. And my friends were coming out of this thing. They were going to be doctors, and they were going to be lawyers, and they were going to be accountants, and all these high-paying jobs with lots of profile. I can remember to this day. And I was probably voted the person most likely not to succeed when I left high school, because I was a really good, well, I'll tell you another story before I finish that story. We were hiking in the Yorkshire Dales in England about 3 years ago. My 2 sons and myself and Lori and my son Michael decided that he wanted to drink 100 pints of beer in 8 days. And anyway, he gave it a pretty good rip. And after 8 days, he had drank 75 pints of beer, and he was pretty excited about 75 pints of beer. No, he was not excited about 75. He was upset that he didn't reach his goal. I think his goal was a little unachievable. I give him a lot of credit for, sticking the arrow way up high, but I said to him, listen, if I'd have I said, that's 75, isn't that like a B minus or something like that? I said, if I'd have come home with a 75 in any subject in high school, my dad would have done backflips. But getting back to the career thing, I went in and I came out. Now remember, my dad's a doctor. My 2 brothers are already out of high school. They're in university. They've got their lives set. And I came out as a long-distance truck driver. So I like driving a lot, but it was, to me, a real bad example of how you can put the wrong thoughts into young kids' head and how you can actually drive them in the wrong direction by doing things like that. I'm not a long-distance truck driver, and that was an example of where I decided that is not my career path, and so I made sure that didn't. So I'm not a long-distance truck driver. I think we've done pretty good around this city and some other cities that we operate in, and we're excited, and we're very, very proud of our employees, and we're very proud of the group that we've put together. And I would ask anybody, if you've got any questions from anything to do with sales or business or banking, how you grow it, I'm happy to answer them now.
I'm supposed to be moderating, but I have a sense that his skill set is sufficient that I don't really have to moderate. My only goal really is to, if you ask a question, I'm supposed to repeat the question so that it's captured on tape.
By the way, I have business cards here if anybody wants to buy a car. That's the other thing I have to tell you. I look in this room and I don't see a bunch of students and adults. I see a bunch of potential deals here. So, remember that.
Can I trust you to repeat the question?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm good.
Okay.
My hearing's pretty good, too.
You talked about culture quite a bit there.
Yep.
Would you say that the culture that you built at your dealerships was more emergent, or did you kind of mold it on your own into what you wanted?
Well, okay, sorry. See, that's why I left this place. The question was the culture that we built, was it emergent, or did we form our own? Well, it was a necessity is what it was, because when I bought Jubilee Ford in Saskatoon, I heard for months and months and months and months and months what a rotten service department we had, and how, I just heard so much about that. And so it really became a necessity, and I didn't really have a playbook. I didn't read anything about it. I just decided that if I could get people to think the way I think in terms of how they treat people, and I'm not just talking about how you treat people in the company, I'm talking about how you treat people everywhere. I've sold a lot of cars to restaurant waitresses because I took the time to ask them what they drove, and I took the time to ask their name, and I took the time to make them feel as comfortable with me as a client as I was with them. Building a culture is not just about what you do at work, it's what you do everywhere. And I can take the surliest Air Canada agent in Toronto and I can disarm them immediately because I know they're not happy. Like, you just can tell they're not really that happy. And the way I do that, I go up to everyone and I say, how are you today, nice lady? Now, how do you get angry with that, Now, the odd one will say, how do you know I'm nice? I said, because I think you're really nice. And they just, so it's just the way you deal with things. It's, I was in Salt Lake City the other day, and I walked up to the counter, and I said, I'm checked in. My name's Vaughn Wyant. Here's my passport. Oh, she said, your flight's 2 hours delayed. You're not going to catch your plane in Denver. I said, wow, that kind of sucks. Is there anything you can do to help me? You know, but most people in that situation, it's not her fault that there was a mechanical. So the best you can do is the best you can do. And I can tell you, you do a lot better by being nice. And she said, well, she said, you can overnight here, you can overnight in Denver. I go, wow, I don't really want to do that. Do we have any other options? And they don't like to put you on competitive airlines. They don't like to do that. But I had said, how are you, nice lady? I use the standard line, still works to this day. And anyway, she ended up putting me on a Delta Airlines flight through Minneapolis and got me home. And then I said to her, you know, that's super. I said, can I send a note to Delta? She says, oh, don't worry about it. It's what we do. We have to look after our customers. I go, one other thing. I said, I'm an Air Canada Elite flyer, so I'm going to have to pay for my bag at Delta, you know? And she goes, yeah, it's true, eh? And she'd already given me a $10 voucher so I could go get a drink. She goes, how about if I give you a $100 voucher toward future travel? Now, think about what she just did. She put me on a competitive airline, which they got to pay for. She gave me a $10 food voucher, and she just gave me $100. And you know why she did that? She wants me to fly on their airline again. And how many times have you been to a restaurant? We're talking about culture. We'll talk about how you build a culture. How many times have you been to a restaurant and you got a bad steak, and you know what they do? They take the steak off your bill. That's what they do. Wrong. You should take the steak off the bill and say, here's a $25 gift certificate. Please come back and we'll get it right next time. That's what you should do. That's about building a culture. And your people will respond and react to how you are for real. And they know the difference. And that's how you build a culture, by being as honest within your business as you are without, because people see you in both lights. Well, it's funny you should ask that, because I used to think I was busy. Oh, sorry, he wants to know what it's like working with my son, specifically Philip. Philip's shirt right there.
Oh, I thought he was Philip. So.
No. Philip is a graduate of this Impact. He's a chartered accountant, and so what it's like, it's really kind of cool. I get to go to work with my boys every day. I think they'll tell you that I empower them to do what they do. They're smart, they know what they're doing. What's really cool about it is I found out, I was super busy before I hired these two guys. And now I'm just as busy, and they're doing all the stuff I used to do. So they're not only my kids, they've actually really helped my business grow, because they've allowed me to go out and do some other things that I did not have time to do. So I get a business opportunity now. I actually have a little bit of time I can think about it and not jam it in between all kinds of other things. So, by the way, I think he's my son. It's just, we haven't done the DNA yet. Over there. Sorry. So the question is, how do you differentiate yourself when you're new and getting into business? Just had that discussion today with a couple of young entrepreneurs that I've been mentoring and ended up investing in their business. It's all about the work you do and the references that you're able to provide. You know, when you get into business and you haven't had your first customer, you know, it's hard to convince someone to do business with you over the next person. There's only pretty much one differentiator, right? And it's price. And the last thing you want to give away in business is your margin. It's what pays all your bills. You know, when people say to me, they say, I can't make any money at this business, I always tell the story about our car wash business on 8th Street called Spiffy. And when we opened it up, the first month rolled through, and we lost $25,000. And our guy, maybe more, I don't remember. Philip will probably know the number, but the guy's coming to me and says, oh, we're losing money. And I said, well, what should we do? I said, well, just put the price up. Put the price up. We can't. That'll make us more expensive than everybody. I said, I know, but we have a better building, we have a better location, we have better technology, we have better people. Put the price up. So they put the price up. And guess what happened? Everybody around town put the price up. Why not take the margin? We still lost a little bit of money, so the next month they came to me and they said, we're still losing money. What should we do? I said, put the price up again. I mean, obviously, we're not charging enough for what we're doing, or we'd be making money. I mean, what else can you do? So they put the price up again. And every time we put the price up, you know what happened? Our competitors put the price up and the lines got longer. They got longer. They actually equated quality with price. So my first answer to you is, don't mess with your margin. Don't give away the keys to the kingdom by giving away your margin. But what you need to do is you need to gradually and incrementally and very thoughtfully build your business slowly. And too many people get into business and they want to get from here to here like immediately, because we're all kind of, you know, it's a fast world we live in. You want to make money on day one. You're going to make money by doing it, by handling every customer correctly and dealing with every single complaint or problem that you've got to the point where that customer says, I'm sending all my friends to that guy. Like when I phoned him up here, he was here 5 minutes later. We have a customer with a car in our body shop today, and you know, it's a $60,000 repair on an Audi. Rolled it over a curb, 60 grand. Should have been written off, doesn't matter. It's been down for 6 full months, and today the fellow's father called me and said, you know, my son's been without his car for 6 months, and we told him it was going to take an awful long time. This is a massive, biggest repair we've ever done on an insurance claim. And so we had a nice chat on the phone, and he was fine. It was pretty good. And I said to him on the phone, I said, by the way, do you guys have wheels and tires, winter wheels and tires for this car? Because it's going to be ready on Friday finally. And he goes, yeah, they're here somewhere. I said, well, how about if we send someone to pick them up and we'll make sure they're on the car for you when your son picks a car up? I mean, it's all about anticipating your customers' needs, and it's all about making sure that you build a portfolio of customers that are meaningful, that would fall on broken glass to refer their friends and neighbors. What is it? It's called building obligation. And how do you ask a customer that you've got to send their friends and neighbors if you haven't built that kind of relationship to begin with? So just like that person, the first, you know, I know social media is the way you get a lot of business, but at the end of the day, it's all about you. And it's all about you building the relationship with the very first customer. Maybe you got to beg a little bit, right? That does happen, right? Where, you know, I'd really appreciate the first job, but after that, if you're patient, and that's a lot of people don't have patience in business, if you're patient, you'll not only build your business, but you'll build it properly, and that's where your goodwill is going to come from. I don't know if that answered it, but that's what I would do if I were you. Thanks. Anything else?
Randy from the Riversdale Business Improvement Insurance.
I recognize you, Randy.
I have a lot of people coming out of school, some out of high school, nothing but passion, fire in the belly. You said you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, and you're a banker. A lot of these would-be entrepreneurs have that. Where would they start with? Is it the money? Is it mom and dad? Is it the friends? Is it a collective idea of a bunch of people? Because we're seeing an influx, and that's the question I'm getting at.
And it's harder and harder, too, to, you know, we had a meeting again, it was just today, and it's harder and harder to get banks to be interested in small business. You know, a lot of them have, you know, lending limits to start at $500,000, and that's not going to be the case with a lot of people. So, you know, it's a difficult, first of all, it starts with a great business plan, and a lot of those small businesses are going to have to be family funded. They're going to have to be friends and neighbors that, you know, that have so much faith and confidence in this young person that they're providing. Here's 10 grand, here's 20 grand. Try to put the foundation of the business in like that. Because without sales history, without rates of travel, without the things you need to go to a bank and say, here's a business plan, I can prove it out. You know, like somebody said to me, I've never seen a business plan that couldn't pay back the debt, right? You just change one number and the Excel spreadsheet does everything else for you. I would say to you that the best thing that these people can do is mentorship. The best business advice that they can get are from people that have been in business. I never knew what it was 20 years ago, but I've mentored dozens and dozens of people because they don't know how to answer those questions. They don't know where to take, and I've ended up investing in some of their, because they're great people, right? They've got all the skills that are necessary. They've got a great business plan, and they've got You know, they've got all the necessary tools. They just lack the experience, and they lack the how do I get started. And I don't know if you remember, Randy, when, you know, we used to say, geez, I don't know how these young people are ever going to be able to afford to buy one of these houses, right? Well, you know what? They're doing it. They're figuring it out, right? Things change and things evolve. But I do think that mentorship is probably the most important business asset that we've got, particularly in a place like Saskatoon, where we actually, a little bit like my company, we really kind of care about everyone's success. It makes us feel good when somebody actually does something from Saskatchewan, they're successful. We feel that we're part of it, right? And so, you know, you can only eat a steak that's so big. So I think that for the successful business people that aren't involved in mentorship, they need to get involved in mentorship.
You're cut off.
Okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm glad.
You know, it's funny. Yeah, exactly. When you were talking about different things in Saskatchewan, my mind's just flipping through it about sales, and lots of people always ask me certain questions, and you try to tell them, and I think that's the greatest problem with university students, and specifically commerce students, is, well, they don't want to be in sales. And you know, it's sort of a rude awakening when they find out if whatever you do in life, it's selling. It doesn't matter. You're trying to get that girl in the bar. You're selling yourself.
Absolutely.
If you're an undertaker, you're selling your service. It doesn't matter. Take any job. And like you said, nothing starts unless something is sold. And being open and friendly, the best story I always remember, I was taking elevators in Toronto. And I always talk to everybody on the elevator. I'm sure you do too. And this one day, I got the whole elevator talking, and the one guy, they finally got to the top floor where we're going, and the guy said, "You got to be from Saskatchewan." He said, "Saskatchewan people are the only people that talk to strangers on an elevator." And that was the biggest compliment I ever got. You know, I thought, wow, that is really cool. So again, I'd like to thank Vaughn for taking the time, giving his very special time. We have you heard that selling thing. We like to present a picture from my wife's next book called Get an Even Bigger Wagon. And you'll be happy to notice there's a vehicle in there. I'm sure it's a Ford truck.
It better be.
I'm quite sure it is. And it's another story from my misspent youth of embellishing the truth. Like when you're 14 and the farmer asks you, "You've driven a 3-ton grain truck before?" And you say, "Oh, you bet." And then learning as you drove out of the yard, sort of thing. So this is just a small gift from us, and thank you very much.
Thank you indeed.